Welcome back to the Investor Professor podcast. This is Dr. Ryan Peckham, and this is episode 49. On today's episode, we're going to go over personal development. We're almost halfway through the year, and so I thought it'd be a good time to just kind of take a step back, give you some of my personal favorites, books that I've enjoyed reading over the years, so maybe you can build up your summer reading list. For some of you, you might be able to share some of these with your kids, teenagers especially, but really just how do we go about protecting our mindset with everything, all the negativity that's going on all the time? It's everywhere. It's hard to defend your mind against it. And so we constantly have to work on ourselves, and yourself is your number one investment, right? It's the number one investment you can make is developing yourself. So that's the topic of today's show. Let's get to work, and I'll see you on the other side. Well, thank you for joining me for another episode. Like I said in the opening, we're almost halfway through the year. And so with that, I wanted to take some time, do a little bit different episode this week, talking about personal development. How do you protect your mindset? How do you develop your mindset? And so I wanted to look back at some of my favorite personal development books, what they've meant to me, and how I've been able to apply those to my life, and just hopefully maybe steady your ship. And as you build your summer reading list, if you're going on a road trip or something this summer, which is definitely going to be more expensive with gas prices, right? But to give you something to listen to, hopefully along the way, where you can kind of just recenter yourself. And so when you do a lot of the, let's say you go to Google and you type in best personal development books, some of these are going to be on there and some of them aren't. And I thought that could be, a reason to listen to this is you might be able to find some books or find somebody that you weren't expecting. And so I think that's always a good thing to find. So my first one that I want to discuss is Coach John Wooden. So John Wooden was the head coach of the UCLA basketball team back in the 60s, 70s, and they won 10 national championships. And he wrote a book. I think I've read most of them, but he wrote a book called Wooden on Leadership, which is a tremendous personal development book, but just talks about what it takes to be a leader, how to be successful. But some of my number one most favorite thing about John Wooden is he was always trying to get people to compete against themselves, right? Because he knew he had athletes that started at different talent levels. Some people are just more talented than others. And so he wanted the players on his team to realize that, hey, even though somebody might just be naturally more gifted than you, you can still maximize your potential by competing against yourself. And so he came up with the Pyramid of Success. You can go Google Pyramid of Success. It'll come right up. And it shows like this pyramid that he built that talked about all the personal attributes that you need to work on to maximize your potential. And so my favorite is the bottom left and the bottom right, which are basically the two most important blocks of anything, right? Because they're the foundation. The first one on the bottom left is industriousness, which is basically hard work. And he says there's no substitute for hard work. And then on the bottom right is enthusiasm, which is you got to love what you're doing, right? So if you love what you do and you apply hard work to it, those are going to set you up for future success because, eventually you're going to figure it out. So and you can go read them, but I think the reason this is connected so much to me is because especially in a time where you have social media and everything else going on, this allows you to focus on competing against yourself. And so the top pillar is competitive greatness, which is you basically maximizing your talent, your gifts, and becoming the best version of you possible. And so, when you think about that, when you're competing against yourself, instead of everybody else, because we start from a different, most of us, especially financially, start from a different starting point than everybody else. You might have different talents or whatever it is, but this kind of allows you to focus internally to start thinking about, okay, how can I just compete against myself? Am I doing better than I was a month ago, a year ago? Am I on the right track? And so in my 20s, I printed out a small version of this Pyramid of Success, and I carried it around in my pocket for years. I actually laminated it at some point and just carried it in my pocket as a reminder. And it really helped me. I mean, it really helped to recenter me. When you look at some of the quotes I've said on the podcast, never mistake activity for achievement. That's not me. That's John Wooden. That was one of his, some of his famous quotes are, never mistake activity for achievement. Success is never final. Failure is never fatal. Success is the peace of mind that you've done the best you can possibly do. And then if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? And so I really feel like he is just, coached thousands and thousands of players. And if you go, just Google John Wooden and look at the players that have, that played for him, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is probably the most famous. But you go look at some of those interviews on what he meant to them. It's pretty apparent the influence that he had on their lives. So that could be one that you can go look at. There's a lot of audiobooks, and I think most of them are probably available anywhere you want. But Coach John Wooden, go do a couple Google searches on him and just look at his philosophy, and you'll see why he resonates with so many people. And speaking of personal philosophy, my second one here is Jim Rohn. And he used to do a lot. I think he's done a lot more audio stuff. He passed away. Both of these guys have passed away. But Jim Rohn, when I was in my mid-20s or so, I started listening to him, and he had a couple, Take Charge of Your Life, Art of Exceptional Living. I still have these in my car, in my truck. It's kind of funny. And I listen to him about once a year, once every 2 years, just to really kind of just rehone the mindset, the skills, just to kind of reacclimate myself with it. But Jim Rohn, talking about building your philosophy and what you think of the world, not what your parents think, not what your grandparents thought, not what people on the news tell you to think, not what anybody else is telling you, but just what is your personal philosophy about where you want your life to be. And I said, the greatest investment that you'll make is yourself. You get one body, you get one mind, you have to feed it good things. And so there's a lot of negativity in the world. There's a lot of reasons not to start on a goal that you have because of what you're seeing on the news or whatever, but there always has been bad things going on. Pick a year, 1965, bad things going on. 1975, there's some bad stuff going on. 1985, there's always reasons to do it. And there's always these political issues. And can you imagine if you ask somebody, why haven't you saved for retirement? And they go, man, I got to tell you, Jimmy Carter was a bad president. I didn't like the things that he did. And you'd be like, what? Excuse what? And you go, yeah, Jimmy Carter, man, he just wasn't good. I wasn't comfortable investing when he was president. Yeah, but he was president 40 years ago. What about the fight? Well, it's just there's always something bad happening. You'd think that they were idiots, but yet today that happens all the time. Like, I can't even tell you how many people I talk to who don't start investing or make investments because they don't like who's president. Right? Whether it was Trump or whether it's Biden or whatever, there's always going to be a segment of the population, no matter who's president, they're not going to invest. Right? But if you put it into the context I just did, you'd be like, well, that's not a good reason to not invest. Right? So again, investing in yourself personally so that you can make more money, create more value. I mean, it just is so key to your future, your family's future, making yourself better. The more money you can produce, the more you're going to be able to save, and the more money you're going to be able to invest. And so You got to put the time in. And Jim Rohn talks about that when you listen to his talks and his speeches. He's really about developing your own philosophy. And so, my, not lesson or, my advice to you would be, I'll have students, I'll recommend books to people and they go, well, I didn't agree with this thing. And I'm like, okay, well, did you agree with the other stuff? Yes. Okay, well, when you read a book or you're listening to somebody, you don't have to agree with every single thing they say. But if you agree with one or two things that you can add to your philosophy, that's what building your philosophy is all about, right? That's what developing your own personal philosophy on, whether it's the way you live your life, the way you invest, the way you work out. I mean, all the things. I mean, that's how you develop as a person, is developing your own personal philosophy on how you view the world and how you want to set out to accomplish things that you have set forth for yourself. And so making sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, that you're not doing it for somebody else's reasons, is key. And I've said a couple times on here, many of y'all know that my undergraduate degree was in engineering. And it was not easy to switch. When my parents had helped, they paid for my undergrad, and all of a sudden, their son's coming home going, man, I don't want to be an engineer anymore. I hate this. That's not what parents want to hear after, after they've spent a ton of money putting you through school. But, my mom told me, well, we're not the ones who have to go to work every day. You got to go to work every day. So you better love it. You got to love it. If you don't love it, you got to find something that you love. And so, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you really do have to enjoy what you're doing, or you have to be working on something that is going to be better. And so I know you've all worked with people that all they do is complain at work, right? But they're not doing anything to make it better, right? They just complain. Well, what do you but they're not working on anything. So, if you're like me, working as an engineer, going to school at night, I was working on something else. I was working on that career change. And so that gave me enough spark to stay motivated, because I knew it wasn't going to last forever. It's the same thing when I was building my investment practice or whatever I'm doing, is if you're working on something you really love and you also have a job that you don't enjoy so much, it's not going to be forever, because you're investing your efforts and time somewhere else. And so it's the same thing when you're investing in yourself, taking that class, sign up for, if there's a class that you're interested in or a subject you're interested in, don't be afraid to sign up for a class to do that. And this goes for, it doesn't matter. Like I have a ton of education. Currently, I'm taking an art class through Sotheby's International because I want to learn more about how to collect art in the right way, right? I mean, never be afraid to admit that you don't know something and sign up for a class or whatever. Spend that money, spend that time investing in yourself and your interests. It is crucial that you do this throughout your life. And so when you look at somebody like Jim Rohn, I mean, that's basically what he was talking about, is invest in yourself. One of his best quotes is, work harder on yourself than you do your job. Right? Invest in yourself so that you can get to where you want to be. So Jim Rohn, John Wooden, definitely some of my top two most influential people that I've never met, but have had such a meaningful impact on the way that I view myself and the way that I view, my goals and the things that I'm working towards. And so they're two that I just constantly go back to. Constantly go back to, because even though I probably read some of their stuff for the first time in 2005, even though you've had all these years go by, it's still, to me, just as meaningful as it was back then. A couple other John Wooden quotes that I love is, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. That's a good one. Either the day runs you or you run the day. And that's basically just talking about, if you don't plan your day, somebody else is going to plan it for you. Right? And so either you're going to make your dreams come true or you're going to make your boss's dreams come true. But you got to be the one who's in control of your day. So, you got to plan your day or somebody else is going to plan it for you. And so you got to just keep your mindset to where you're working on the things that you want to work on. So I think that's, you got to keep those goals top of mind. Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. He also does a really good goal book. But the compound effect is basically, how the choices that you make compound over time. He was really influenced by Jim Rohn as well. David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. I think we've talked about Goggins before. We've highlighted his book before as well. But man, you talk about just developing mental toughness. His story is pretty incredible, and he's pretty big right now. So you've probably already heard of him. And then one of the things that I think is that we don't put enough emphasis on. When I say we, I mean like people in academia and some of the jobs that you take. We teach people a lot of skills, but one of the skills that we don't necessarily teach, and academia definitely doesn't do a good job of this, is just teaching people how to work with other people. Right? So if you're in a job where you need to work with people, man, you got to put some effort into developing skills that allow you to work with people in a better way. And I have so many people that come up to me that want to be financial advisors, that want to do something, similar to what I'm doing. And, you can be so great at finance, you can be so good at accounting, whatever it is, but if you can't work with people, and it's not just accounting and finance degrees or professions, if you cannot work with people, life is going to be more difficult for you. That is the simple fact of the matter. Is if you cannot work with people well, life is going to be harder. And so if you're not comfortable talking to people, if you're not comfortable, presenting, you have got to put some effort into that and put some reading into that, because it makes your life so much easier. Like it just makes your life so much easier. And people tend to work with people they like, people that are like them, people that they feel like they relate to. And so these next couple books are just all about working with other people, because I do think it is a undervalued skill that if you could wave a wand, it would help a lot of people out if they could just work with people a little bit easier. We've all worked with people, that bosses, whomever, and we're like, geez, little rough around the edges, right? It's kind of what we say. But you have to develop this, or at least work on it. And it takes work. It's really hard to make people if you're not a people person, it's hard to make somebody a people person. It just is. So there's an author, professor called Robert Cialdini. He wrote a book called Influence and Persuasion. Those are both very good. The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. That's a lengthy book. I think I've talked about that one before. I'm about halfway through it. It's very, very good, but it's definitely not a quick read. There's How to Win Friends and Influence People, which that one does show up on every goal search that you do on Google. So how to win friends and influence people. But really, early in my career, I was talking to a lot of people, and I've never, I'm lucky. I've always had a talent for talking. I'm not really, rejection doesn't faze me, those kind of things. But I never wanted to be in a conversation with somebody and not be able to talk to them about something that interested them. And so when I started reading books, I would read books on just whatever subject, just trying to broaden my horizons so that no matter who I met, I could have an educated conversation with them about something that they were interested in. And so obviously you have to start realizing that most people's favorite subject is themselves. And so if there's a group picture and you're in a group picture and somebody shows you the group picture, who do you look at first, right? You look at yourself. And so just knowing this, when you're talking to somebody, there's things you can do. Ask them what's going on in their life, all these things, subjects that relate to them. And so knowing how to talk to people, reading books that talk about how to talk to people are important. I would also say, to add to this, is books on body language, learning how to, interpret people's body language. Because when you're in front of somebody, when you look at all the things that you pick up subconsciously, you're picking up body language, you're picking up tone of voice, and you're picking up the words that they actually say. When you're in person, only 7% of what somebody picks up is the actual words that are coming out of your mouth. Right? Most of it's tone of voice. Do you sound like you're interested? Are you interested in them? Do you sound excited? And then does your body language match that? And so when you're doing something like a podcast like this, most of it, 60% is my tone of voice and 40% are the actual words that are coming out of my mouth. So if I don't sound excited, if I don't sound like I enjoy what I'm talking about, it'll come through. So knowing these little tips here make a big difference in your day-to-day life just by knowing little tricks like this, right? So a couple others would be, if you're the one asking questions, you're the one that's in control of the conversation. So if you have a boss or somebody that constantly grilling you, asking questions to you over and over and over again, where it's almost like, just rapid fire questions, answer their question and then ask them a question back to try to break the cycle of them just grilling you, right? So all of these little things that you can read about can really have a big impact on your life. When you ask somebody questions, it normally takes 3 questions to get a personal response. So if I ask you, how's your day going? You're going to say, good. Like, you're just going to give me the canned answer. But if I keep asking, no, really, what's going on today? And it'll take about 3 questions to get you to finally open up. And that's not just for a stranger. I mean, that's like somebody that that could be a family member, because we know that somebody's asking us, hey, how's your day going? That we feel like they're being polite. So we be polite back and say, oh, I'm doing great. Right. So there's all these little, kind of pre-programmed social responses that if you're really trying to get to the heart of the matter with somebody, you got to be able to break that pre-programmed response. It's the same thing if you go to, a clothing store and they say, can I help you? And you say, I'm just looking. That's another pre-programmed response. So if you're in sales, these are the things that you need to study so that you can work on how to talk to people at a more deeper level and really get them to open up and start asking you questions, or, all of these things start to help, with your career. Another book is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Sorry, I needed a drink. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And this is another, just a good book that discusses, what you think about. Things start to come into your life because you're open to those kind of opportunities. So if you're thinking about making money, starting a business, developing yourself, working out, whatever you think about, that's, subconsciously your mind starts to go to work. And so I haven't dropped a financial book today, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the book that I would discuss, because it changes your mindset on money. Instead of saying, I can't afford that, it's how can I afford that? Right? And so the first part of that book is really, really good, especially for teenagers and somebody young. It's really like the first, I like to give that book to somebody as their first financial book, because I want them to change their mindset on how they view money. Right? So just having those mindset shifts makes a huge difference in putting your mind to work towards the things that you want to work on. So, Think and Grow Rich is good because it's a much older book, but it's good because it talks about that. The things that you think about are the things that you're going to try to make happen. And so if it's, I want to find a new job, I want to start a career, a different career, I want to work out more, I want to go back to school, I want to save more money. If you're thinking about those things, they become the important things in your life. And so that can kind of guard against, there's bad news there's bad news on TV again today. Oh, the economy's not good. Oh, I don't like who's president, right? You have to stand guard to the door to your mind and block out all the negative thoughts that creep up, because that's kind of how most people are wired, is they're going to focus on the negative. And if you read, I forget which book it's in, but you're twice as impacted by a negative as you are a positive. And the reason for that is you don't expect bad things to happen. It's like in investing, right? If nobody makes an investment and goes, man, I really hope I lose money. I'm going to invest in this company because I want to lose a lot of money. That's not the way we think. We think, okay, I'm going to invest and it's going to make money. And when it does, we go, hey, I was right. See, I knew, that's why I did it. But when we lose money, we go, man, we're twice as impacted by losses as we are gains. And so I am very aware of that when it comes to my clients, knowing that if I make them 20% one year and I lose them 10% the next year, they're going to be much more impacted by that 10% loss than they were that 20% gain. And I have to make sure that I'm talking to them, talking about strategy, all of those things, because I know that most people, that's how their mind is going to work. So all of these things, building your personal philosophy, building your self-disciplined, thinking about your habits, how they work together, how you work with other people. I think this is a very good mix for developing your personal strategy on how you attack life and how you're going to attack the second part of the year. So go through, look up some of these books, read some of them, listen to some of them on your summer vacation, and think about how you can attack the second half of the year. And we'll reconvene. If you have other personal development books that you think that I should check out, send them to me. Email them, put them on our wall on Investor Professor website, send them to me on social on Instagram, and we'll highlight them, because there's always a chance to be able to read more, do more, look at more books. So I hope this was helpful for you. I appreciate your time as always. Never mistake activity for achievement, and I'll see you next time.